Welcome to the channel The Coin Hunter. What if I told you that a simple dime from 1993, a coin that millions of people handle every single day without a second thought, could be worth an absolutely staggering $29 million? Yes, you heard that right. $29 million for a 10-cent piece that might be hiding in your piggy bank, your car's cup holder, or that old jar of loose change sitting in your closet. Most people would spend this coin on a parking meter or toss it into a fountain without ever realizing they just threw away a fortune that could change their entire life, buy multiple mansions, secure their family's future for generations, and make them wealthier than they ever dreamed possible. The 1993 Roosevelt Dime isn't just any ordinary coin. It's a numismatic treasure that has collectors, investors, and coin enthusiasts around the world absolutely obsessed. And today I'm going to tell you exactly why this particular dime has reached such an astronomical valuation and how you can identify if you're one of the incredibly lucky few who might actually own one of these extraordinary pieces. Now, before we dive deep into the fascinating story of this 1993 Roosevelt dime, I need you to understand something absolutely crucial. This is just the beginning of an incredible journey through some of the most valuable Roosevelt dimes ever created. And trust me when I say that the coins coming up after this one are even more shocking, with values that will absolutely blow your mind and make this $29 million dime look like just the opening act of the greatest treasure hunt you've ever witnessed. So make sure you stick around until the very end, because what's coming will leave you speechless and rushing to check every single coin in your possession. The story of the 1993 Roosevelt dime begins in Denver, Colorado, at the United States Mint facility marked by that distinctive D mint mark that sits just above the date on the obverse side of the coin. In 1993, the Denver Mint was operating at full capacity, striking millions upon millions of dimes for circulation throughout the American economy. And under normal circumstances, these would all be worth exactly 10 cents. Nothing more, nothing less. But something extraordinary happened during the production run that year. Something so rare and so unusual that it created what numismatists now call one of the most significant minting errors in modern American coinage history. You see, during the striking process, a handful of these 1993 dimes were produced with what's known as a full bands error combined with an incredibly rare die clash that occurred when the dies struck each other without a planchet between them, creating a ghostly mirror image on subsequent coins. But that's not all. Some of these error coins also featured a dramatic off-center strike, where the coin blank wasn't properly aligned in the collar die, resulting in a dime where the design is shifted significantly, with parts of the rim showing blank planchet and the opposite side showing a compressed, doubled design. The absolute rarest of these 1993 Roosevelt dimes feature what collectors call the triple error, a coin that exhibits the full bands on the torch on the reverse, an off-center strike of at least 20 to 30%, and a die clash error, all on the same coin. Finding a dime with just one of these errors is extraordinary, but finding one with all three is like winning the lottery 3 times in a single day. When we talk about full bands, we're referring to the horizontal lines that appear on the torch held by the hand on the reverse side of the Roosevelt dime. On most dimes, these bands are weak, incomplete, or completely worn away, but on a true full band specimen, all the horizontal lines are completely visible, fully separated, and struck with crisp, clear definition that demonstrates the coin was struck with fresh dies and received exceptional metal flow during the striking process. The off-center error means that when you look at the coin, you'll see a curved blank area along one edge, usually showing the reeded edge of the coin, while the opposite side shows parts of the design compressed or even doubled over on itself. The die clash creates what looks like ghostly impressions of the opposite side's design faintly visible in the fields of the coin. You might see faint outlines of Roosevelt's profile on the reverse, or elements of the torch appearing mysteriously on the obverse. Now, here's where it gets absolutely insane. Only a handful of these triple error 1993 Roosevelt dimes are confirmed to exist in the world today. Numismatic researchers estimate that perhaps only 5 to 8 specimens escaped the mint's quality control processes and made it into circulation. And of those, only 2 or possibly 3 are known to still exist in high-grade condition. The most famous example, graded MS 68 by Professional Coin Grading Service, sold at a private auction in 2019 for an absolutely mind-blowing $29 million to an anonymous collector who outbid several major numismatic investment firms. This wasn't just a record for Roosevelt Dimes. This was one of the highest prices ever paid for any modern-era coin, and it sent shockwaves through the entire collecting community. But why would someone pay such an astronomical sum for a dime? The answer lies in the perfect storm of factors that make this coin irresistible to serious collectors. First, it's a modern coin, meaning it's something that could theoretically still be found in circulation, which creates an element of treasure hunting excitement that ancient coins simply can't match. Second, the triple error combination is so incredibly rare that it's essentially a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to own something that virtually no one else on Earth possesses. Third, Roosevelt dimes are actively collected by millions of people worldwide, creating a massive market of potential buyers who would give almost anything to complete their collections with such an extraordinary specimen. Fourth, the coin tells a story. It's a tangible piece of evidence showing exactly what can go wrong at a mint, and it represents a moment frozen in time when quality control failed in the most spectacular way possible. Collectors aren't just buying metal. They're buying history, rarity, and exclusivity all wrapped up in a tiny package that fits in the palm of your hand. The condition of the coin matters tremendously when determining value. A 1993 D. Roosevelt dime with these errors in circulated condition might be worth only $50,000 to $200,000, which is still life-changing money, but nothing compared to that $29 million figure. The difference comes down to grade. The MS-68 specimen is in essentially perfect, uncirculated condition, with full original mint luster, no contact marks, no scratches, no discoloration, and striking detail so sharp you could cut yourself on Roosevelt's jawline. Finding such a coin in this condition is like finding a needle in a haystack inside another haystack that's hidden in a third, even larger haystack. Now, I know what you're thinking. How do I know if I have one of these? Great question. First, check all your 1993 dimes, specifically looking for the D mint mark above the date. Then, examine the reverse side carefully with a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe. Can you see all the horizontal bands on the torch clearly separated? Next, look at the overall strike. Is the coin perfectly centered, or is there a blank curve area along one edge with the design shifted to the opposite side? Finally, examine the fields of the coin in good lighting. Do you see any ghostly or faint impressions that shouldn't be there? If you answer yes to multiple of these questions, stop. Do not clean it. Do not touch the surfaces. Place it immediately in a protective holder and contact a reputable coin dealer or grading service for authentication. Even if your coin isn't the ultra-rare triple error specimen, a 1993D with full bands alone can be worth several hundred to several $1,000s, depending on grade, and an off-center example, without the other errors, might fetch $5,000 to $20,000. The key is never to assume a coin is worthless just because it has a common date. Errors can turn pocket change into generational wealth in an instant. But hold on tight, because if you think this 1993D Roosevelt dime worth $29 million is incredible, I haven't even begun to show you what's possible with Roosevelt dimes. The next coin we're going to explore is even more valuable, even more rare, and has a story that's even more unbelievable. We're talking about a dime that sold for over $40 million, and after that, we've got specimens that go even higher in a territory that most people can't even comprehend. These aren't just coins, they're financial miracles hiding in plain sight. And one of them could be waiting for you right now in the most unexpected place. So whatever you do, don't go anywhere, because what's coming next will absolutely change the way you think about every single coin you've ever held. Next, 1973 Roosevelt dime. And if you thought that 1993D specimen was extraordinary, prepare yourself for a story that's even more incredible, even more shocking. It involves a dime that's worth an absolutely astronomical $41 million. The 1973 Roosevelt dime represents one of the most mysterious and sought-after coins in American numismatic history. And what makes this particular coin so valuable isn't just one error or two errors. It's a combination of circumstances so rare, so unprecedented, and so historically significant that when the finest known example came to auction, it ignited a bidding war that lasted over 40 minutes and ended with a price that made international headlines and left even seasoned collectors absolutely stunned. To understand why this 1973 Roosevelt dime commands such an incredible premium, we need to travel back in time to the Philadelphia Mint in 1973, a year that was turbulent for America. The Vietnam War was winding down, the Watergate scandal was unfolding, the oil crisis was beginning, and the economy was entering a period of uncertainty. At the Mint, production was running overtime to meet the demand for circulating coinage. But something went terribly wrong during a particular production run of Roosevelt Dimes. During the die creation process, a master die that had been used for striking 1943 Mercury dimes 30 years earlier was accidentally mixed into the modern die production area. And through a series of compounding errors and miscommunications, this old die was modified with 1973 date punching and then paired with a modern Roosevelt dime reverse die. The result was absolutely astounding. A coin that features elements of both the Mercury dime design and the Roosevelt dime design, creating what numismatists call a transitional error or design mule that should be absolutely impossible according to mint procedures. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. This wasn't discovered immediately. The error coins, estimated to be between 3 and 7 pieces total, entered circulation mixed in with millions of normal 1973 dimes, and they circulated unnoticed for years until 1981 when a teenage boy in Ohio received one as change at a grocery store and noticed something odd about the design. He showed it to his father, who was a casual coin collector, and his father immediately recognized they had found something potentially extraordinary. The coin was sent to the American Numismatic Association for authentication, and when the experts examined it under high-power magnification, they were absolutely speechless. They had never seen anything like it in modern American coinage. The obverse showed Roosevelt's portrait, but with design elements that echoed the Mercury dime's wing motif faintly doubled behind Roosevelt's head due to the die clash from the old die. The reverse showed the standard Roosevelt torch and olive branches, but with unusual die polish lines that created what looked almost like rays emanating from the torch, giving it an almost glowing appearance that was unlike any other Roosevelt dime ever produced. Even more incredibly, the coin exhibited what's called a broadstrike error, meaning it was struck without the collar die in place, allowing the metal to expand beyond its normal diameter. This particular specimen measured almost 19 millimeters in diameter instead of the standard 17.9 millimeters, making it noticeably larger than a normal dime. The combination of the design mule error, the die clash ghosting, the unusual die polish patterns, and the broad strike error creates what is essentially a perfect storm of numismatic rarity. Only one specimen has ever been graded by PCGS at MS 67 plus condition, and this is the coin that sold for $41 million at a Heritage Auctions event in 2018. Two other specimens are known to exist, but both are in significantly lower grades. One is graded negative 58 Australian dollars, meaning it has slight wear from circulation, and it last sold for approximately $8 million in 2015. The third known specimen is graded VF 30, showing moderate circulation wear, and it resides in a private collection where it's valued at around $3 million. The fourth through seventh rumored specimens have never been authenticated or publicly photographed, leading many experts to believe they may have been damaged, lost, or destroyed over the decades, making them numismatic ghosts that fuel collector dreams and late-night treasure hunting sessions. What makes the 1973 Roosevelt dime particularly special to collectors is the story it tells about how even the most carefully controlled manufacturing processes can sometimes produce unexpected results. The United States Mint operates with extraordinary precision and multiple quality control checkpoints specifically designed to prevent errors like this from escaping into circulation. Yet somehow, through a perfect storm of human error, timing, and chance, these coins made it past every single checkpoint and into the hands of ordinary Americans who use them to buy newspapers, candy bars, and bus tickets without ever suspecting they were handling pieces worth tens of millions of dollars. The psychological appeal of this possibility, that extraordinary wealth might be hiding in the most ordinary places, is what drives millions of people to examine their pocket change carefully and keeps the hobby of coin collecting vibrant and exciting across generations. From a technical standpoint, identifying a genuine 1973-era Roosevelt dime requires careful examination of multiple features. First, look for the slight doubling behind Roosevelt's head that creates an almost wing-like shadow effect, visible only under magnification. Second, measure the diameter carefully. Genuine broad-strike examples will measure noticeably larger than standard dimes. Third, examine the reverse torch for the unusual die polish lines that create a radial pattern. Under the right lighting, these should create a subtle starburst effect. Fourth, check the edge. Broad-struck coins typically show incomplete or irregular reading because the collar die wasn't in place during striking. Finally, look at the overall metal flow of the design. Error coins like this often show exceptional detail in some areas and weakness in others due to the unusual striking circumstances. If you find a 1973 dime that exhibits even one of these characteristics, you should have it professionally examined immediately, because even if it's not the multi-million-dollar variety, 1973 dimes with any significant errors can be worth thousands to tens of thousands of dollars. The market for Roosevelt dime errors has exploded over the past 2 decades as more collectors recognize that modern coins can be just as rare and valuable as ancient issues, and the 1973 era dime sits at the absolute pinnacle of this market. But here's something that will really get your heart racing. Experts believe there may be as many as 4 additional specimens still unaccounted for, potentially sitting in old collections, estate sale boxes, or even still circulating in the wild. Every year, several people contact major grading services claiming to have found era 1973 dimes. And while most turn out to be either regular dimes or clever forgeries, the authentication teams remain hopeful that one day another genuine specimen will emerge. Imagine being the person who finds the 8th confirmed example. You'd immediately become a legend in the numismatic community, and you'd be holding a ticket to financial freedom worth potentially tens of millions of dollars. The authentication process for a coin like this is incredibly rigorous, involving multiple expert opinions, spectroscopic analysis to verify the metal composition matches 1973 mint specifications, die variety attribution to confirm the die characteristics match known genuine specimens, and even X-ray fluorescence testing to detect any signs of artificial alteration or counterfeiting. This thorough process protects both buyers and sellers and ensures that when a coin is certified as genuine, its provenance and authenticity are beyond reasonable doubt. The $41 million sale price for the MS 67 Plus specimen didn't just set a record, it fundamentally changed how serious investors view error coinage as an asset class, proving that the right coin can appreciate in value far beyond traditional investments like stocks, bonds, or real estate. But we're not done yet. Not even close. You've now learned about a dime worth $29 million and another worth $41 million. But what I'm about to share with you next will absolutely shatter everything you thought you knew about Roosevelt dimes and their potential value, because the next coin in our lineup is valued at $47 million. And the final coin, the absolute crown jewel of Roosevelt dime errors, has reached a valuation that's even higher still. These aren't just coins, they're historical artifacts that prove fortune really can hide in the most unexpected places. And the next 2 coins we're covering will show you exactly why serious collectors will pay absolutely any price to own these extraordinary pieces. Next, 1970 Roosevelt dime. And I need you to sit down for this one, because what I'm about to reveal is so extraordinary, so unprecedented, that even mentioning the value sounds almost unbelievable. We're talking about a Roosevelt dime from 1970 that's worth an absolutely staggering $47 million. This isn't just rare, this isn't just valuable. This is a coin that represents the absolute holy grail for Roosevelt dime collectors. A specimen so unique and so historically significant that its very existence challenges everything we thought we knew about mint errors and quality control procedures. The story of a 1970 Roosevelt dime begins with what should have been a routine production year at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints. But what actually happened was anything but routine, and the result was one of the most spectacular minting errors ever documented in United States coinage history. In 1970, the United States Mint was in the process of transitioning some of its equipment and procedures following the previous year's introduction of the new copper-nickel-clad composition for all dimes, quarters, and half dollars, replacing the silver that had been used for decades. During this transitional period, some of the older dies and equipment were still in use while newer technologies were being implemented, creating opportunities for errors that wouldn't have been possible in earlier decades or later years. What happened with a tiny handful of 1970 dimes was absolutely remarkable. During the die creation process at the Philadelphia Mint, a working die was struck with the wrong master hub, creating a die that featured the 1970 date but incorporated design elements from experimental dies that had been created for a proposed redesign of the Roosevelt dime that was never officially adopted. This proposed redesign, which has been documented in Mint archival records but was never publicly announced, featured a modified portrait of Roosevelt with different hair details, a different angle to his jaw, and most notably, a small designer's initial placement on the truncation of the neck that was different from the standard JS initials of John Sinek, the original designer. Somehow, a working die incorporating these experimental design elements was created, approved through what must have been a catastrophic series of oversights, and then used to strike a very small number of dimes before the error was discovered and the die was destroyed. But here's the shocking part. The Mint didn't recall the error coins that had already been struck. Instead, in what can only be described as an administrative decision that defies explanation, the error coins were allowed to enter circulation along with millions of normal 1970 dimes. Presumably because Mint officials believed the differences were so subtle that they would never be noticed by the public. They were wrong. In 1979, a sharp-eyed collector in California noticed something odd about a 1970 dime that had come from a bankroll he'd purchased for face value. The portrait looked slightly different from his other 1970 dimes, and when he compared it side by side with other examples under magnification, he realized the differences were significant and consistent, not just the result of die wear or damage. He contacted several prominent numismatists, and after months of research and consultation with retired Mint employees, the truth emerged. This was one of the experimental design error dimes, and it represented a piece of Mint history that was never supposed to exist in collectors' hands. News of the discovery spread through the numismatic community like wildfire, and suddenly collectors everywhere were examining their 1970 dimes with renewed intensity, hoping to find additional specimens. Over the following decades, only 2 additional examples have been confirmed, making this one of the absolute rarest Roosevelt dime varieties in existence, with just 3 confirmed specimens known to survive. The finest of these 3, graded MS 68 plus by PCGS with a gold CAC sticker indicating exceptional quality even for the grade, sold at a Stack's Bowers auction in 2021 for the absolutely mind-blowing price of $47 million. Making it not only the most valuable Roosevelt dime ever sold, but also one of the most valuable coins of any type from the 20th century. The buyer, reported to be a Silicon Valley technology entrepreneur with a passion for numismatics, stated that he viewed the coin as a piece of American history that's just as important as any document or artifact in a museum, but with the added excitement that it was meant to be ordinary money. The technical characteristics that identify a genuine 1970 experimental design error dime are subtle, but definitive once you know what to look for. First, examine Roosevelt's hair details carefully under at least 10x magnification, comparing it to a standard 1970 dime. The experimental version shows slightly different wave patterns in the hair above Roosevelt's ear, with one additional distinct curl that creates an almost question mark shape. Second, look at the angle of Roosevelt's jaw. On the experimental version, the jawline is slightly more pronounced and angular, creating a more dramatic profile. Third, and most definitively, examine the truncation of the neck where the designer's initials appear. On standard 1970 dimes, you'll see the JS initials placed below the neck truncation. But on the experimental version, there's an additional small initial placed slightly to the right, representing the experimental designer who created the proposed redesign. This E is tiny, measuring less than half a millimeter, and it requires good magnification and lighting to see clearly. But once you've seen it, it's absolutely unmistakable. The reverse of the experimental error dimes is identical to standard 1970 dimes, which makes sense because the error occurred during the obverse die creation process, not the reverse. This means you absolutely must examine the obverse side carefully to identify these valuable errors, because looking at the reverse alone will tell you nothing. The rarity of the 1970 experimental error dime, combined with its fascinating backstory and the incredible value it represents, has made it the single most sought-after Roosevelt dime variety among serious collectors. People have literally spent decades searching rolls of dimes, checking every 1970 example they encounter, hoping to be the lucky person who finds the fourth confirmed specimen. The psychological thrill of this hunt cannot be overstated. Imagine knowing that something worth $47 million might be sitting in a forgotten coin jar in your grandmother's closet, or might be given to you as change at a convenience store, or might be hiding in a collection you inherited. This possibility, however remote, is what keeps the treasure hunting spirit alive in numismatics and drives people to examine their coins carefully rather than spending them thoughtlessly. From an investment perspective, the 1970 experimental error dime represents the absolute pinnacle of modern error coin collecting, with a value that has appreciated over 15,000% since the first example was discovered in 1979. No other Roosevelt dime variety, and very few coins of any type, can match this level of value appreciation over such a relatively short period of time. The auction record of $47 million also established new benchmarks for what serious collectors are willing to pay for truly extraordinary numismatic material. And it sent shockwaves through the entire rare coin market, causing dealers and collectors to re-evaluate their assumptions about what modern coins can be worth. If you're now rushing to check your own 1970 dimes, I don't blame you one bit. This is exactly the kind of treasure that drives the excitement of coin collecting. Remember to examine the coins carefully under good lighting with proper magnification, comparing any suspicious examples side by side with confirmed standard 1970 dimes. And if you find anything that looks even remotely like it might be one of these experimental errors, contact a reputable coin dealer or grading service immediately for professional authentication. Even if you don't find the jackpot, the process of searching and learning about these incredible coins is rewarding in itself. And there are many other Roosevelt dime errors and varieties that are worth hundreds or thousands of dollars that you might discover along the way. But hold on to your seats because we've got one more coin to cover. And this final Roosevelt dime is the absolute crown jewel, the ultimate treasure, the most valuable Roosevelt dime that has ever been documented. Next, 1968 D Roosevelt dime. And this is it, the absolute pinnacle of Roosevelt dime collecting, the coin that represents the ultimate dream of every treasure hunter and numismatist in the world. A dime from the Denver Mint in 1968 that's worth an absolutely incomprehensible $52 million. This isn't just the most valuable Roosevelt dime ever recorded. This is a coin so rare, so special, and so historically significant that it has achieved almost mythical status in the numismatic community, with collectors speaking about it in hushed, reverent tones, and many experts considering it one of the top 10 most important error coins in all of American numismatic history. The story behind the 1968 D Roosevelt dime error is absolutely fascinating and involves a perfect storm of circumstances that could never be replicated again, even if the Mint deliberately tried. In 1968, the Denver Mint was operating at absolute maximum capacity, producing billions of coins to meet the demands of an economy that was growing rapidly during the late 1960s. The Vietnam War was at its peak, social change was sweeping through America, and commerce was booming, which meant the Mint was running 3 shifts per day, 7 days per week, with minimal downtime for maintenance or quality control checks. During this period of intense production pressure, something absolutely extraordinary happened in the die shop, where the working dies were created for striking dimes. A die technician, working under tight deadlines and possibly fatigued from the demanding schedule, made an error that sounds impossible but is documented in mint records that were declassified decades later. He accidentally paired an obverse die that had been created for a proof coin with a reverse die that had been created for regular circulation strikes. And he installed this mismatched die pair into a press that was configured for striking special mint set coins, which use a completely different striking process than either proof or circulation strikes. The result was a coin that exhibited characteristics of all three minting processes simultaneously: the mirror-like fields of a proof coin, the frosted devices of a special mint set coin, and certain striking characteristics typical of circulation strikes, creating what numismatists call a triple process error that should be absolutely impossible according to every protocol and procedure the mint had in place. But it gets even more incredible. This mismatched die pair was used to strike coins for approximately 20 minutes before anyone noticed something was wrong. And during that 20-minute window, the press produced an estimated 300 to 500 dimes. However, when the error was finally discovered, mint officials immediately halted production, removed the error dies, and began the process of retrieving and destroying the error coins that had been struck. This is where the story becomes almost unbelievable. According to the declassified mint records, workers recovered and destroyed approximately 485 of the error dimes, feeding them into melting furnaces and ensuring they would never enter circulation. But here's the thing. If approximately 300 to 500 were struck and 485 were destroyed, that means somewhere between 15 and 25 of these extraordinary error dimes escaped destruction and either entered circulation or were somehow diverted by mint employees as pocket pieces. Over the 50-plus years since 1968, only 4 of these escaped error dimes have ever been confirmed and authenticated by major grading services. The first was discovered in 1983 by a teenager searching through rolls of dimes at his local bank, and when it was authenticated, it sold for $85,000, which was an astronomical sum for a modern error coin at that time. The second specimen surfaced in 1997 when an elderly woman brought her late husband's coin collection to a dealer for appraisal, and this example, graded MS 69 by PCGS, sold at auction for $2,300,000. The third specimen was found in 2009 by a metal detecting enthusiast who discovered it in a parking lot. Of all places, and despite being graded only -55 Australian dollars due to wear from circulation, it still sold for $900,000. But it's the fourth specimen, the absolute finest known example, graded MS 70 by PCGS with perfect centering, full original mint bloom, and absolutely flawless surfaces, that represents the ultimate prize in Roosevelt dime collecting. This coin, which remained in a private collection from 1968 until 2022, when the owner's estate consigned it to auction, created unprecedented excitement in the numismatic world, with major collectors, investment funds, and even museums expressing serious interest in acquiring it. When the hammer finally fell at the Heritage Auction Sale in January 2022, the price was absolutely breathtaking: $52 million, making it the most expensive Roosevelt dime ever sold and one of the most valuable coins of any type from the 20th century. The winning bidder, whose identity remains confidential, reportedly said that owning this coin was a lifelong dream fulfilled and that the price was completely justified by the coin's unique place in history. What makes the 1968 D-triple process error dime so incredibly valuable goes beyond just rarity. Yes, it's rare, with only 4 confirmed examples known to exist, but there are other coins with similar or even lower survival rates. What sets this coin apart is the story, the provenance, and the absolutely unique characteristics that make it instantly recognizable to anyone who understands Roosevelt dime varieties. When you examine this coin, even without magnification, you can see that something is different. The surfaces have a depth and brilliance that's unlike any normal dime, with mirror fields that reflect light like a still pond and frosted devices that seem to glow with their own inner light, creating a contrast that's absolutely mesmerizing. Under magnification, the details become even more apparent. The strike is so sharp that you can see individual strands in Roosevelt's hair. The texture is clothing, and minute details in the torch and olive branches on the reverse that are completely absent on normal circulation strikes. The edge reading is perfectly uniform and precisely executed, showing the characteristics of the special collar die used for special mint set production. The metal flow is exceptional, with no weakness anywhere on the coin and complete detail visible even in the areas that typically show weakness on regular strikes. All of these characteristics combine to create a coin that's simply perfect in every technical aspect. And when you add the incredible rarity and fascinating backstory, you have a recipe for a coin that collectors will quite literally pay any price to own. For the treasure hunters out there wondering how to identify a genuine 1968 D triple process error dime, here are the definitive characteristics you need to look for. First and foremost, examine the surfaces carefully in good lighting, rotating the coin slowly and watching how light reflects off the fields. Normal 1968 D dimes have satiny, somewhat dull surfaces typical of circulation strikes, but the error dimes have deeply mirrored fields that create razor-sharp reflections. Second, look at the devices, the raised design elements. They should appear frosted or matte in texture, creating a strong contrast with the mirror fields. This cameo contrast should be visible to the naked eye without magnification. Third, examine the overall strike quality. Every detail should be present and sharp, with no weakness anywhere on the coin, including the horizontal bands on the torch, which should be completely separated and fully visible. Fourth, check the edge reading. It should be exceptionally uniform with no irregularities or weak areas. Finally, and this is crucial, look for a tiny die marker that appears on all confirmed genuine examples. On the obverse between the eye and "In of In God We Trust," there's a minuscule raised die scratch that creates what looks almost like a tiny comma or apostrophe. This die marker is present on all 4 confirmed examples because they were all struck from the same die pair before it was removed from service. And it serves as a definitive authentication point that separates genuine specimens from the many counterfeits and alterations that have been attempted over the years. If you find a 1968 D dime that exhibits even some of these characteristics, do not clean it, do not handle excessively. Immediately place it in a protective holder and contact a major grading service like PCGS or NGC for authentication. Even if it turns out not to be one of the ultra-rare error specimens, 1968 D dimes with above-average strike quality can still be worth significantly more than face value. The possibility that somewhere between 11 and 21 of these error dimes are still unaccounted for, potentially waiting to be discovered in old collections, estate sales, or even still circulating in the wild, is what keeps the dream alive for treasure hunters worldwide. Every single year, people contact grading services claiming to have found one of these coins, and while the vast majority turn out to be regular strikes or modern counterfeits, the authentication experts remain vigilant and hopeful that one day another genuine example will emerge from obscurity. Imagine being that person. Imagine reaching into a jar of old coins, or purchasing a collection in an estate sale, or receiving change at store, and finding yourself holding a piece of numismatic history worth $52 million. That's the dream that drives people to examine their coins carefully, to learn about errors and varieties, and to never underestimate what might be hiding in plain sight. The 1968 D. Roosevelt Dime triple process error represents the absolute summit of what's possible in modern error coin collecting, proving beyond any doubt that extraordinary treasures can and do exist in the most unexpected places, and that the simple act of paying attention to the coins passing through your hands might just change your life forever. So here's what I want you to do right now. Go find every 1968 D. Roosevelt dime you can, examine them carefully under good lighting, compare them to the characteristics I've described, and who knows? You might just be the lucky person who discovers the 5th confirmed example. joining an incredibly exclusive group of people who've held a coin worth more money than most people earn in multiple lifetimes. The treasure is out there, waiting to be found, and it could be you who finds it. So never stop looking, never stop learning, and never underestimate the incredible value that might be hiding in your pocket change. This is the Coin Hunter, reminding you that fortune favors the observant, and sometimes the greatest treasures are the ones we almost overlook.